Grace and peace to all of you joining us tonight. Thank you for being a part of the service, being a part of what we're doing here at New Testament Church of the Firstborn. We're located at 1508 Hargrove Avenue in Gastonia, North Carolina, 1508 or 1510, whichever one that you can plug into your GPS and whichever one you hit first, just as long as you hit it and start heading this direction. We have services at 10 a.m. on Sunday, and then we have these live streams every Wednesday at 7 o'clock where we sort of have somewhat of a panel discussion. We have all kinds of discussions, whatever discussion you want to talk about. We talk about all kinds of things. But and that's not limited to tonight. There's no telling what in the world we'll get into tonight because we've been in the flow of the Spirit, and we invite you into that along with us. We invite you into what we're doing. Speaking of inviting you into what we're doing, this Saturday at 4 o'clock, November the 2nd, we will have a trunk or treat, and we will have cars lined up with all kinds of candy. We will have taco truck here. So bring an appetite, bring your kids, bring everybody dressed up, bring candy, enjoy yourself, enjoy your time around a bunch of people that are really good to be around. I like to think that we're all good to be around. I like to think that we're all friendly, nice people. So come and be a part of what we're doing. That's what we'll be doing this Saturday. And then, of course, our normal services on Sunday and Wednesday. And if you really enjoy what we're saying and you really want something like this to get further out into the world, we would appreciate it. There's a link that is below in the comments where you can give. We have a 501c3, so it's tax deductible, so you get the break from Uncle Sam next year whenever you're doing your taxes. And, of course, you're given to a worthy cause to give a worthy word of love, forgiveness, inclusion, grace, peace, all of that to the world. So if that's something that you want to be a part of, please join in with us. We are listener supported. We're supported by gifts. We're supported by tithing. We're supported by offerings. So everything that we do here is based on the gifts that people give us, and we're very good stewards with it. Speaking of which, we have renovations here at the church that we'd like to jump in and try to modernize a little bit to make it a little bit easier for you to view as well, with a better backdrop, a better screen, a better everything, just to make it a lot more easier for people to be able to access what we're doing and have a better experience all the way around. So, because for the one main part, we really believe in this. We really believe in what we're saying. We really believe in this message and believe that it's a message of grace, believe that it's a message of love, and that's what matters. That's what, to me and to all of us, that's what really is worth getting out there to people, letting everyone know that they've been included in everything that God has been doing from the beginning. And that includes you, everybody that's watching and listening tonight. So we're going to jump into a little bit of a discussion on who knows what.
It's got so many places it could flow.
We've got a lot. We've got a lot here. So who wants to jump in first with something?
So, all right. Sunday, if you missed Sunday, please go to the Gathering Echo app, check out that sermon. Brent preached on Sunday, did a fantastic job. And as we've been going back through and we've been treading the waters, so to speak, in Luke 8, Matthew 8, Mark 4, where there is a great storm that comes on Lake Gennesaret with Jesus in tow with the disciples. And what we've really kind of touched on is there were a lot of other boats in tow as well that were following along. So there wasn't just the disciples following Jesus. There were others following Jesus into this journey, into this trip. But when you started talking about I believe you were in Matthew on Sunday, out of Matthew 8, when Jesus commands the storm, that it can be, well, the etymology comes out to like an admonishment or rebuke by implication. But when I was looking at it, and this is not, well, I say but because I was like, I wonder about that. I want to look at that a little bit deeper because the way I see it, the way Francois kind of laid it out in his translation is through his study and research, Jesus picked this moment, this lake, this time to sail, knowing ahead of time a storm was coming. Mm-hmm. Now, when you get into the scriptures, when you read into the very next iteration, the very next part of the story is when they get to the other side, immediately there is a need and immediately there's a miracle. Mm-hmm. But the journey would have taken about 3 days, but for this storm. So there's this idea that when I was looking up, when I was looking it up in Matthew, to use that just to kind of go back to that, in Matthew 8:26, where it says, "And he said unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith?" We talked about that. The fearful from the word delios, meaning faithless, little faith from oligopistos, meaning lacking confidence in God. So why do you not have faith? Why do you lack confidence in God? Why are you not persuaded at this point that God will get you through anything?
Yeah.
Nothing in the elements, nothing in nature will prevent you from God's intended purpose. God's here to protect you and save you. Then he arose and rebuked the wind. So they get that from the word epitimio, which means to tax upon, that is, censure or admonish. But by implication, it means to forbid or straitly charge or rebuke. Where my mind went to when you briefly touched on it, it was like and gone.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, oh, wait, what else is there? My mind immediately went to Isaiah 63 and Revelation 19 of the winepress of God.
Yeah.
And how he's treading about in the winepress to the point where his garments are soaked in blood. And Jesus, being that ultimate sacrifice to go in and come out with garments soaked in blood, the blood of his sacrifice, the blood of our redemption, ultimately to be cleansed white as snow. But there's this idea that in the elements in the winepress, in order to get the juice, there's a crushing that takes place.
Yeah.
There is a necessary breaking down of the grape itself. And to me, the story in the context of Jesus picking the day, picking the time, knowing the storm is coming, and then going to sleep in the boat, all kind of led me to the idea that I wanted to open up for our discussion. Is he admonishing the elements in the Scripture? Or is he merely having to tell the elements to stop your intended purpose because I have to show these disciples how to have faith? Because the intended purpose, when we read it, immediately there's a need. Immediately there's someone that needs Jesus. And I feel that spirit we've been swimming and flowing in when I talk about it. Immediately there's something that needs to be done, but he has to slow down to bring them up to speed. Because if you don't understand what it is to have faith in God right here, when we get to the other side, where are you going to be? What are you going to do then? Because we know what we meet when he gets to the other side. We're talking about unclean spirits and swine and a man that is possessed, a man that is out of control, out of his mind. A real problem, not just for himself, but for the community and others at large. So to me, it's less of what the literal admonishment is and more of what the implication is, which is just to forbid the elements from finishing the work. I'm just, and that's why it's peace. Be still. I know what you're here for. I know what your intended purpose is. But I've got to stop this process to bring these others up to speed, because I know the moment we land, there's an immediate need of faith. There's going to have to be a change, because purpose is calling. Meaning is calling. The fulfillment of who I am and what you're supposed to be is about to be on full demonstration. But to get there, we need to slow down a little bit. You're not where you need to be. And that's a little different in terms of a juxtaposition, but I think the idea I'm getting to is the storm was necessary to facilitate the outpouring. Immediately necessary. The crushing of the winepress is necessary for the outpouring of the juice, for the immediate consumption, which is what Jesus gives us at the wedding feast at Cana. Right. It's not fermented. It didn't take time. It's right now. And that's the present revelation of the New Testament and what Jesus has to offer. That's where my heart went to. So that's where, from the sermon, I just thought you killed it. And that one little statement was like, yeah, that is what it means. But contextually,
Yeah.
is that what we're supposed to extrapolate from the story?
I think absolutely, because you can. The Saint Gregory the Great, I think it was around the 4th or 5th century. He said that Jesus is not just the one who is tread, but the one trodden. So he's the one who treads and is the one who's trodden.
Yes.
So he is the one that is being run over. He's the one that's being pressed, and he's the one doing the pressing. So it all comes back to the involvement and everything that has to do that takes you right back to Jesus. So for me again with the whole faith idea with it, I think that the church at large has lived in left brain since the Enlightenment. They've tried to live in this left brain mentality that, well, if you can prove it, I'll believe it. If you can prove it, I'll believe it. And that's this utilitarian way of looking at it. Right. And it brings it right back to this, well, it's got to be practical. It's got to be practical. And yes, it does. It does have to be practical. I have to find a way to believe this myself. I have to find a way for me to believe it. But as soon as you start doing that and you start thinking of like, all right, well, how do I find my truest self? How do I find what's the real me? What's the true me? How do I discover this? Then you start looking for a way to quantify it. As soon as you try to look for a way to quantify it, it stops being miraculous and it starts being very mundane. Now it's no longer, because now you found a unit of measure. And when you try to find a unit of measure, now I can qualify and quantify. Now it's if you don't measure up to the way that I do it, and you don't do it the way that I believe it, and you don't believe it this way, because this is the thing that I think is great about all the synoptics, is that it's narrative. For one, it's written in a certain narratological way, and it's in a certain genre. But the thing is about it, these secondary characters, which are the 12 disciples, it's 12 different iterations on following the Lamb.
Right.
It's 12 different ways, neither right nor wrong, but it's 12 different guys that get it right, get it wrong, sometimes mix it up, sometimes mess it up, but they're still following the Lamb.
Right.
And following him wherever he goes, and it's helping to build faith within them.
Right.
So when we try to live on
it's
this
true diversity.
It is true diversity. And what it shows in these 12 is the story of Christianity at large. There's so many ways to believe it. There's so many ways that people practice it, but it's also it's not just that. It's this idea that with different levels at life or different places in life, different situations in life, it's going to bring you to a certain belief and a certain faith. Is if you make it utilitarian, if it is just about the practicality, then it stops being real and it stops being about what you feel. Now it has to be something that I can qualify and quantify, something I can measure. But when you think about it in Luke 24, with the two that are on the road to Emmaus, and these guys, they do not recognize him, and they're talking. And then he says, well, what are you talking about? And they go through this whole thing, and then the ladies came to us and told us that he was gone. We went to the tomb ourselves and saw that he's not there. And then they're just completely baffled. And then he laughs at them. And the first thing he says to them, that you are simple of heart. You're simple of heart. And that's what's interesting, is that lead up that I've never really noticed until a few days ago. You're simple in your heart. It's like, did you not realize, you're not believing the prophets. He had to do this. He had to suffer.
Right. And
it says that. Don't you, and he's, of course, speaking of himself.
We're made perfect by the things that we say.
Yeah, he's, don't you realize, you don't even believe the prophets. You're simple of heart. And then then they're like, oh, wow. And then it says that he goes and breaks down Moses. He breaks down everything from Moses all the way to Jesus. And then by the time they recognize him, their heart goes from being simple to their heart saying, didn't our heart burn? Right. Didn't it? It felt like it was set on fire inside us. So they have this feeling.
Yeah.
So they're experiencing God bodily. And it's really throughout antiquity, throughout time and memoriam. We have experienced God as people, as humanity. Ever since the dawn of humanity, they've learned to experience the divine through the body. And we've attributed bodily, anthropomorphic behaviors, attributes to the divine, and say that God looks like us, or I look like God. And it's gone back and forth.
Sure.
But that's the way that almost, and this is through every civilization, every culture, they've always attributed human-like characteristics to the divine.
Sure.
It's the way, and there's something else about that, though. It's not just that, oh, well, he must look like me, or is it, I must look like him.
Right.
I must look like the divine.
Exactly.
And so it's a realization. So for them, on the boat, what I think that he's trying to get to is, if you find yourself in me, then when you do the deep search to look within, it's not done with all the it's not done all the other ways that we normally look within. If we look within without being first realizing that we're found in Christ, then all of the other dark and light, we're like, oh my God, it's a mess in here. What am I? What manner of man am I? But then when you find out that this manner of man, with all of his ups and downs, all of his squabbles, all of his quarrels, all of his fighting, all of his everything, just like these 12 guys are following Jesus with all of their mixed bag of emotions and mixed up everything, then you realize, like, I'm those 12 guys. I'm those 12 iterations right here, but I'm found in him. I'm found in him.
Right.
And then it stops being utilitarian, and then it stops trying to be this, like, well, if you prove it, I'll believe it. It's like, I felt something. Right. I can't explain it. I can't quantify it. But for those on the road to Emmaus, my heart's burning.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, no.
I think it's awesome that you brought that up, because the bodily, feeling God in your body, I think about Thomas, because you have the disciples all rushing in there, and they're all pumped up, they're all hyped up, because they had just literally seen the risen Lamb. And Thomas is aching as Peter is on the boat, or they are on the boat, saying, do you not care that we die? Thomas is saying, I don't really care what you guys say you said. I didn't experience it. I didn't feel it. Like, I didn't feel it. And it's going to take me literally touching it. It's going to take me literally touching his hands, touching his scars. And Jesus honors that need, that necessity in Thomas to feel it in his body, to have an experience as a human. And I think that's the line that we're titling this tonight, is God is interested in you making it. That was the line that you said Sunday, and that was something that just, wow, it was like tuning fork as soon as you said it. And that was like, my whole being like came in line with that statement, because I think that's what all of us naturally do. And you see the disciples at different times taking turns. One's doubting, one's being strong. One's getting it right, one's getting it, right and wrong. They're learning, like you said. It's 12 different iterations. That's beautiful. But then you take it on up to us, and here we are now. And there are times when you're on fire and times when I'm not, and vice versa. And that's what the community and the full body really brings into reality, brings into light for all of us. Like, he really does believe in me. And you're there to show me that he still believes in me, even when this quote-unquote storm that may have been for my good, although I didn't see it. Thomas, if he could have chosen, I'm sure would not have wanted to be the last one to find out.
Sure.
But my God, what a storm for Thomas.
Right.
What an amazing storm for Thomas. Because now Thomas is our connection to the story. Because Jesus looks at Thomas and says, you've touched. Good, great. You see me. You believe. He said, you've seen. Blessed are those who don't see and still believe. And I think that's our end to, like, this bodily experience and this necessity to feel it in our body. Because we try to make it so spiritual and all the hoopla and all this and that. Sometimes, like, you really want to feel it.
But it is the spirit.
Yeah.
The body.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all, that's the house.
Right.
This is the house where I'm going to feel it. This is the house where I'm going to experience it.
That's why everything becomes so anthropomorphic, right?
It does.
Is you're identifying that there is something about you that's divine.
Right. Yeah.
But you're only using your eyes to try to see it.
Right.
And so what do you see with your eyes? Well, you see man.
Yeah.
You see clay. You see Terran. You see Terra.
Yeah.
So you depict these deifications of yourself that are as much a deity as it can be.
Yeah.
In that understanding, as anthropomorphic in a way, shape, or form. And that's how we've always depicted it for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. That's how we've plastered it on walls, or written it in hieroglyphs, or written it in cuneiform. That's how we've discussed it and talked about it.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're saying.
Right.
What we're saying is that when I look into this mirror that is God, I see God for the first time, and that reveals to me the unseen me that I can't see with my two eyes.
Yeah.
And then, okay, we have a different understanding of what this looks like. And then what it looks like is what it feels like when it's like nothing else you can experience in nature. And that's what the presence of God is.
Exactly.
It gives you almost a vision of what you really look like, what you really are a conduit to and of. And that changes the perception of things. That's why people that have those types of experiences, in a motel room or at a bar or at a party that really feel something, they also say, usually, they see things differently when that happens.
Right.
And that's because they're not seeing with the natural eye anymore. They're getting a vision into what God really is. And maybe with Thomas, this is the last iteration of another boat storm moment for him, where now he's finally seen the vision that is Jesus, that Jesus is trying to show these guys the whole time. But they're stuck in a way that I described it, but we had talked about this when we talked the other night, is they're stuck in these patterns of thinking. Bruce Lee, I'd had a conversation with somebody else. It was a really great conversation. It was really enlightening. But Bruce Lee had, and I'd read it, he had said that that fixed patterns can never change because they're not adaptable and they're not compromisable. You can't find truth in a fixed pattern. That truth only exists outside of a fixed pattern, where there's adaptability and flexibility and compromise. And it seems to me that we've made some hay out of this before in James, where you make the simple calculation. Simple being the childlike calculation, which is a calculation that it's all joy because God is the all that is in all. So there isn't a calculation you can come to where it's not God and it's not joy. If you're seeing things without using your man's eye, if you're not looking at the world and the terror that you live in, if you're looking into the divine of yourself, then yes, the calculation is joy. Is that a difficult calculation to make? Yeah, because you live here on the earth and you have earthly eyes that do see things and you do experience things and you do feel things, and that makes it hard. And that's where the calculation of anthropos comes in, where it's basically adults. What do? We do the math on things. What's the statistical analysis? What's my percentage here? What's the cost reward analysis that I can make? And another, I can't remember who coined it, but a scholar had said once that math is the science of patterns. And I immediately made the connection to that line in James, where the disciples are in a pattern. Weather has patterns, right? So we're getting into this pattern of thinking, this pattern that needs to be stepped outside of, because faith requires you to believe in the things that you cannot see. So there's no pattern you can follow to get there.
Right.
You have to step outside of the pattern to find the truth you need to see, not with your eyes, but with your mind and your soul, what God is asking you to open up your eyes and see. So this weather has a pattern. It's so predictable that everyone knows it's not a good day to sail, including Jesus. But what's he going to do? We're going to sail into it anyway, because I'm going to take them outside of the pattern to show them the real truth of things. What could have taken us 3 days to arrive at a miracle, if they'll just have the faith, we'll arrive there in a day, and we'll be doing the will of God.
And by their calculations, they've only seen that storm from a distance.
Right.
Those were the days they never went out on the water.
Right.
They've seen a storm like that, except they saw it from the shore.
And they've seen the patterns of people that have gone out and never came back.
Correct.
So what's their pattern? Hold.
Good.
Stay put.
Good.
We don't know what happens with that man on the other side in, on the other side of Lake Gennesaret.
Yeah.
Is it?
Man,
Yeah. We don't know. Sorry, I went blank on it. We don't know what happens if they wait 3 days.
Right.
Because it's immediately.
Right.
The way it's, I think it's in Mark, the way it's written is immediately there's a need. So it's all outside of the pattern that Jesus is taking the disciples to show them the truth they need to see, which then is like, well, what was Bruce Lee tapped into to make such a godlike statement? Maybe it was God.
Repeat the Bruce Lee statement again.
I am paraphrasing it.
Okay,
I'm probably
we'll
butchering
paraphrase
it, but that truth cannot be found in fixed patterns because they are not adaptable and they do not bend. But truth can be found. It is only found outside of fixed patterns. Is that like the end of the quote?
one of his big things that he always talked about in his fighting style was to be like water.
Right.
That's what he would say, is that it's
Right.
if you come to a fight, you're not thinking, oh,
Yes.
I'm Crane style. I'm
Right. Now
this,
you're reading my mind.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Because that's the connection.
that's what he did.
That's the connection that I made to the storm. We're talking about a pouring out of the Spirit that is funneled in literally by the waves, the wind, and the water. And we're talking about a wine press that crushes the grapes. When we talked about in the past, we've gone through it before when we talked about the still small voice. I'm trying to find the Greek on that.
The exact.
Yeah, the
go ahead.
Damama dot kol, which means the whispering instrumental sound of the crushing. The beautiful translation and revelation of where God is found and heard in you, as we are the fruit of the Lord, who is the vine, Abba the husbandman, and Ema the water. And then you go into Isaiah from there into Isaiah 27, and then we get to Isaiah 63 with that. But that's where it led me to, is Bruce Lee's understanding of life was to be like water. Jesus' understanding of life was to be living water,
Right.
that is moving through things, moving outside of your fixed pattern, your fixed way of making decisions. You have to step outside of all of that. You have to be willing, like he was, to enter into the wine press, knowing it is going to crush you, and the breaking of your skin, the breaking of the house that holds the juice has to be broken for the juice to pour out and be poured out on all mankind. It even says later on in Revelation that when the wine press is tread, and that blood or that juice, it's literally, in the etymology, it's the juice of a grape is poured out on all of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
On all of the earth. Well, whose juice do you think that is, baby?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's your Welch's. Huh? That's what we're talking about. We're getting into, and we joke about it. We have these little inside jokes. We're been in the spirit flow, been in the flow. It's all about the flow.
Yeah.
And that's what the storm brings us to. That's what the wine press brings us to. There's a flow of the juice for nourishment, for saturation, for enjoyment, and that is echoed in the New Testament as the blood of Jesus Christ that we take at communion, remembering the blood that was shed for me and you as he treadeth the winepress alone. Isaiah.
Right. That's
Right?
the point, is that he alone
Right.
does it, and he alone is trodden first.
Right.
He's the firstborn among many brethren, and he's
Right.
the firstborn of them that slept. He's the firstborn from among the dead.
You're worried
He's
about
the
dying.
first.
I'm here to give my life.
He does it, though. That's the thing, is like that's the whole point of being found in him.
Right.
And finding identity, finding my truest self in him first.
Yeah.
First realizing that I live and move and have my being in the one who was trodden and tread.
Yeah.
That he's the one that gave the life, the juice is poured out, all the good that is within is given, and it's given freely. But then he tells them, take up your cross and follow me.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to lead you to a place. It's going to lead you to have this experience of, like what Paul said to the Corinthians. And he's talking about where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's freedom. So there's this liberty. And it's what would the liberty, what could it be attributed to? If there's liberty there, if there's freedom where the Spirit is, and the Spirit is the one that's flowing or moving like breath and like water. So where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. If the Spirit of the Lord is, you have freedom. What is freedom from? What?
Patterns.
Patterns,
Right.
systems. It's the first
Calculation.
exactly. So it's like, for us, for me at least, when I feel like I'm living my truest self or living my truest identity, it's when I feel like I am the same way as Jesus, and I'm living outside of the systems that would bind you in some way, things that would, and whatever those systems are, political systems, religious systems, cultural, familial, whatever it is, you put whatever list or whatever title you want to put on a system or a pattern, and it's like, as soon as I feel free or outside of that, I feel like I'm living in the Spirit. I feel like the Spirit has come alongside me and made me aware of something, and it's called, to me, I call it presence, and I think the Scripture does too. I'm aware that it's the presence of God in the middle of all the swirling, all the chaos, all the storm, all of everything. And then suddenly I'm able to find presence, not just in the places where I would anticipate it or expect it. Because for most of us, we expect the presence of God to fill a church. We expect the presence of God, and we expect to feel that when we're in a church service or a worship service. But you don't expect that when you're called out onto the ocean or whatever it is, and it's in the middle of the storm, and nothing is going to go right. And you know it's not right. You already know this is the wrong place to be. This is the wrong time. But can you find presence or God in all of that?
Right.
Yes.
And this is what he's proven to them.
Yes.
This builds their faith. Your faith starts being, and I know that it's narratological, so it's it's this idea that the small faith or little faith or no faith at all, whatever it is, it at least starts burning something. Something's going to get kickstarted here, and you're going to start believing that God is here, God is there, God is everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's not a place where you can go to escape his presence. There's not a place where you can go to get out of the presence of the Most High, of the divine, of the Spirit, because here he is out on the water, and he's asleep. He's at rest.
Right.
And they're losing their minds.
Right.
They're going all over the place. They're wondering if they're going to live or die.
Right.
But here they are in this thing, and it starts to crush everything that for them is the system that they were most commonly accustomed to.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that they are typically you'd find them in.
Yeah.
For them, this system, it takes them to a place where I think that they're just completely surprised by God. At least I think that I would be if I was out on that boat, and here I am, and I'm just surprised at the fact that God is participating in this.
Right.
And that's, for me, I'm telling you, that's when I see God involved in some of those things in life and in the world and in everything else, culture, you name it. And I'm like, man, God is participating in this.
Man.
I found God here. And it's like the stories that you said, you're on an acid trip at a party, you're at a bar, you're in a hotel room, and here's God. Here's God. And I feel something and I experience something in the most least likely of places. Here's God.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing the divine in some way. But that's the stuff that builds you in the faith.
Right.
The stuff that's like, you feel that it's like one layer built upon another, and suddenly you start believing something that you didn't believe before, or you believe in a way that you didn't believe before, because you're now seeing in a way that you never saw before. You're using your senses in an entirely different way.
Right.
You're using something that is...
Your senses become secondary.
They do, and now it becomes about, it's like what the scripture says, that we happily feel after him, that we found of him. So I'm feeling around for God.
That's a good
and
one.
then everywhere I feel him.
Yeah.
And then I get accustomed to something else now. It's not the system of the world, the systems of this world, the kingdoms of this world that become the kingdoms of the Lord and Christ at this point, because now it's everywhere I feel. Instead of seeing destruction, instead of seeing chaos, I'm seeing something else. I'm not seeing it by my natural eyes. I'm walking by faith. I'm walking by what I believe.
Yeah.
So for Paul, when he says, think on these things, use your brain. And sometimes you have to tell your brain to shut up, but use your brain a certain way, or you direct your brain. And you think on the things that are good and holy and honest and just and of good report. When you're thinking on this kind of stuff, your mind is stayed on something that is not like the rest of the world. It's not like everything else. It's not like every other system that wants to tell you that that it's all falling to pieces.
Yeah.
Or that nothing matters.
Yeah.
When you realize that my body matters, the material world matters, everything around me matters.
Yeah.
And that I matter to God as I am who I am. And as I am who I am, I'm found in him.
Yeah.
And so is the rest of the world. So are all these other systems. So that's the paradox of trying to hold two things in union that seem to not coexist. Saying that this world with all of its systems, religious or otherwise, and trying to say that, it's found in God. Like, well, there's some things that are found in God that are still, when we talk about different things, political things or religious things or just cultural things, and you're like, how in the world could that be found in God?
Right.
But here's the deal. It's still a kid.
Yeah.
It's still a child.
Yeah.
That's still his. No matter what they're doing, no matter how poorly they're acting, no matter how badly they're behaving, and we're the same way, to some extent or another, but no matter how severe it is, you still have to say that person is a child of God.
Can I share a story real quick? So this past Saturday, we went to that concert for Carolina, the one at Bank of America Stadium they had in relief for the the mountains, bunch of people there. It was Credence's opportunity to see Billy Strings. She's a big Billy Strings fan. Credence is my 5-year-old daughter. So we take her to this concert. We're getting ready for the show to start, and this lady comes down to sit beside of us, her and her husband, and a couple others. And I don't think 3 sheets in the wind would be a good way to. I think she was like 17 sheets into the wind. She was.
I mean, it's a concert.
I think she started at about 7 a.m. in preparations, and I met her at about 7 p.m. So she got there and sat down, and all of a sudden, and I know this is a little microcosm of a macrocosm, but go with me here. So we're in our seats, we're waiting on the concert to start. She comes and sits down, and I'm thinking, I'm excited. My daughter's going to get to see Billy, and all this is great, and everyone's all happy, and it's blah, blah, blah. Here she comes, sits down, and she immediately is a storm in herself. She is meeting people coming to their seat. I mean, they're literally coming to their seat for the first time, and she's telling them, "You're not going to walk by me again tonight." I mean, she was a problem. She was a problem, a big problem, right? And so I start reasoning within myself. I'm like, well, how am I gonna handle this? Because the teenage girls beside of us are, young ladies are already drawing up a plan to get security involved and blah blah blah. And I told Chris, I said, I'm gonna try something. So I sat down and I started talking to the lady, and I'm like, well, how are you? Blah blah blah. What's your name? And she ends up telling me she's from Charlotte, and she works at said place. And then she says, and their bonuses are bleep, bleep, bleep. So I start talking to this lady and reasoning with her. I'm like, well, I understand what you're saying. You're like, you're kind of, you deserve something. You work hard, right? Blah, 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 blah. So before you know it, we kind of start, like, everybody in the whole row hates her except us. And we need to go to the bathroom. They let us up. Anybody else comes to the bathroom, they're like, hey, you ain't coming by. You need to go the other way. I'm like, this is kind of wild. So, but I say all that to say this. 2 hours into the concert, there was this moment where everybody had this bracelet and it lit up blue at a certain time, right? So at that time, the whole stadium was lit up blue for this really, really special song. And I look over there, and Credence, my little girl, and this lady are standing there dancing together, having this moment. And I'm like, and I told Kristen, I said, there was a time in my life where we would have been absolutely miserable sitting here.
Yeah.
There's a time in my life where my patterns would not have allowed that situation.
Right.
My patterns would not have brought that lady that opportunity to dance with my daughter on that night.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's something to this stuff. There's something to breaking the cycles. It's psychological. It's why you go to a psychiatrist, like, to get you out of your cycles, to get you out of your patterns that only lead to the same results.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to share. Go for it.
It's a circle, right?
Yeah.
It's just over and over and over again. And even and I think that's even what I think speaks more clearly to what Jesus is really doing when he commands the storm is even the cycles of the weather are subject to God. Mm-hmm. When God has a purpose, when God is in it, when God's meaning is being pursued, and Joshua proved this long before Jesus ever did. Yeah. I mean, we get this the battle of the Valley of Ajalon, right? Like, he has a purpose. God has given Joshua a mission. You will get victory. He sees the sun setting before the battle is won, and in faith, he speaks to the sun and the moon and bids them to stand still. Not in a rebuking way, but in an authoritative way. When we get to Jesus on the boat, it says when he arose, the way the etymology works out is it's not arising in a frantic, he's not startled, he's not afraid of what's going on. It says he arises in authority. Mm-hmm. And Joshua arises in Joshua 10 in authority and speaks to the very same universal elements that Jesus speaks to, and he has the exact same effect on this world that Jesus does thousands of years later.
Right. Good.
We've seen it before. As Solomon said, there's nothing new under that sun. That sun has stayed still for a day.
Right.
It's broken a cycle that science can't explain how or why it's broken, or why it had virtually zero impact on anything but for God. But for God. And the faith of the disciples should have been to know, if Jesus told us to get on this boat,
Something about
and he told us we had somewhere to go.
Yeah.
And he said now was the time. I don't care what the clouds look like. I don't care how strong the wind is. My faith is we are going to get to where he told us we are going. Joshua's faith in that valley was, I am going to get the victory God told me was mine. I am going to accomplish what he asked me to do. And that is what the disciples lack. It's really the faith like Joshua in that moment. Joshua, of course, in the Hebrew, Yeshua, the Yeshua HaMashiach. We get into all of this reiteration. It's Joshua's Christophany in that moment. Maybe not his entire life, maybe not his entire journey as the leader of Israel into the Promised Land, but on that day, there's none like Joshua. What manner of man is this, that even the sun and the moon obey his commands? And they've forgotten. They've forgotten their own history of their own forefathers who, without God in the flesh right next to them, were already performing greater works.
Yeah.
That is a positive statement Jesus makes, but it's also retroactive in some of the miracles that we saw performed by other men on this planet.
Right.
Whether you believe in the history of it or not, we don't have these stories for no reason.
Right.
We can't imagine these things for no reason. People don't come up with these things because we don't possess within us all of the divine potential of God himself or herself, or however you want to say it. However you identify with God. In the feminine, because that's part of God too. In the masculine, that's part of God too. It all works. There's no way you can reject God for not having an option for you, unless you're denying the option that he designed you to be.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're rebelling against your own nature yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're unwilling to admit that you're in rebellion because you're seeking acceptance. Pseudo-acceptance for a pseudo version of yourself. What we are in this life is not what we are. I don't mean that to say that we don't have meaning and we don't have purpose.
Right.
But what we see is a mammal. It's a house. You go home and you see your house. You don't think much of it, but the house comes alive when you're inside it. The lights come on and off. Sounds start being heard. Hopefully all good ones. Hopefully some not. You hear what I'm saying, though? If you're not in the house is just brick and mortar. It's just stick and sheetrock.
Yeah.
It's just mud and clay. That's all it is. It's not a home until you live there.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mammal. It's just a house. It is not what we are without us living inside of it, without God being in us.
Right.
That is the outpouring he's asking you to have. The faith to trust that the storms that you're going through, the crushing that you feel, is going to produce out of you the very best that you can produce.
Yeah.
That's the faith you have to have. That not only that, but immediately after you go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after you subject yourself to it. As seasoned fishermen, their faith should have been, guys, we've been out on a lot of waters. We've seen a whole lot out here, but we've never been out here with the master before.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how this goes. There's no excitement. Why?
Well,
because the calculation is doing the math instead of the calculation being the joy that you're getting to sail across a lake with the master of heaven and earth.
Yeah. I think the seasoned fishermen were doing the math.
Right.
The seasoned
That
fishermen
was the pattern they were in,
yeah,
right?
They were
They didn't
doing
see
the math.
outside of the pattern
Yeah.
and just the joy of the journey and the trip.
And it's the same thing he does to Peter as they're walking into the temple. Peter says, they asked Peter, are you going to pay temple tax? Is your master going to pay temple tax? And Peter speaks out of his seasoned fisherman.
Right.
Of course, I pay all my bills. Yeah,
Right.
Jesus will pay. We work hard. We pay our bills. We do things right. We get there when we're supposed to get there.
Whoa, we've done the math.
We're at the places we're supposed to be at the right time. We're supposed to be there.
We got the guy with the notepad and the pen. We've
Yeah.
done the math.
Yeah.
We know what we owe.
Yeah, we'll pay it. And then
We got
Then Jesus tells him what?
Abacus.
What are you doing?
Why are you telling me to pay temple tax? I'm just a kid. I'm a child.
Yeah, like
I'm not my
you're the only one on the hook here.
my dad's God. my dad's my father's God. Like why should I pay your stupid temple tax? Just for that, you big idiot stupid fisherman, I'm gonna make you take your little cane pole like Opie and go over there and catch a random fish for just so I can get you back down to the kid
I wonder
level.
how long it took him to catch that fish.
I don't think it took long.
You don't think it took long?
No, I think it was the first cast.
See, I think
Because he
that-
probably cast it like this.
This is the
Stupidest
dumbest thing I've ever done.
ever.
See, I think it
All I was trying to do is be a man.
I think I would have appreciated it more if Jesus was like, "It's going to take him 5 hours to catch that fish." That's
Stupid
to
fish in
me.
this lake.
If I were Peter, that's what God would do to me. I can tell you that right now. I'd be out there hating it the whole time. 5 hours later, finally caught that stupid fish.
But he catches the fish, and there's the temple tax is in the fish's mouth. Why? Because it's a breaking of the pattern.
Yeah.
It's the broken pattern that he works in. And the exact Bruce Lee quote, man, we got to hit that just right. All fixed set patterns are incapable of adaptability or pliability.
Mhm.
The truth is outside of all fixed patterns.
Right.
Man, it's awesome.
So one of the things that it makes me think of is before Maximus the Confessor, they had Chalcedon, Council of Chalcedon,
Yeah.
where they talk about what's the humanity or the divinity of Christ? What's the mixture here?
Right.
Is it part this, part that, part this, part that? So they came up with this.
What are the percentages?
Yeah, what are the percentages? How do we calculate? How do we quantify? What
Right.
do we do? What's the measurement? So they came up, all right, well, let's all agree on hypostasis, or hypostasis is a Greek word. Initially, the word, it meant like mixture, like water.
Yeah.
That's initially where the word comes from, is this. So there's something about once you pour all this in, eventually the word ended up being like sediment, which is, again, it's
Water's got to be involved.
it's water and dirt.
Yeah.
And it's just a mixture. And as soon as
Right.
you pour the water into the dirt, it's no longer dirt and it's no longer water. It becomes sediment. It becomes
Yeah.
some other thing. So that's that's
Becomes
the
something
word.
else.
Yeah. So that's what, when they talk about his divinity and his humanity, was he divine or was he human? It's like, well, he was both.
Right.
But both mixed in a certain way that you can't separate the two.
Yeah.
That you can't distinguish one from the other, because it's spirituality or the divine working alongside and participating in his humanity, and his humanity participating in the divine, and both of them working together so closely that you can't separate it. So then Maximus comes along and he talks about how this incomprehensible hypostatic union is, he said that it is Christ revealing the mystery of the Christ,
Come on.
the cosmic Christ.
That's good.
That this is him revealing the mystery of what it is to be the anointed.
Getting somewhere now.
So he starts going through that in his writings, and then he keeps going even deeper into it. And it's the you can find a lot of it in here. I'll give you the resource on the cosmic mystery of Jesus Christ. I've read this many times, and it's got so much good stuff. But look for I don't know what chapter this is. It's called Ad Thalassium 60. So check that one out on the Cosmic Mystery of Jesus Christ. That's my favorite one. That's the one that I always have. The spine is bent on the book because of it. But that's where he starts going through this idea of that the mystery gets revealed in Jesus Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the mystery of not just Jesus Christ, but Christ, like as a whole. What this
Messiah.
idea. Yeah, what
The
is
anointed
this?
one.
What is this anointed idea? What is it like for all of us to be? And so he talks about Ephesians 1 with, this is the recapitulation. This is Jesus gathering everything in heaven and earth, under the earth, gathers it into himself.
Right.
Anakephalusistai is this one of the longest Greek words in the New Testament. Anakephalusistai. It's recapitulation.
Now he's just showing off.
I am, but
Anakathe Lucestai. Did I get it?
too.
Did I get it? Did I get it?
Anakephalusis.
Anakephalusis.
All right, now one of you spell it.
Yeah. All right. Alpha.
Don't.
Alpha.
Don't. He'll spell it with the Greek alphabet too, because he's a turd.
Just learning it.
These scholars and their stuff.
These turds. But that's what But that's the recapitulation. So when Irenaeus talks about it, he talks about it in one way, about our humanity and our divinity being combined together.
Right.
Because his whole thing, it's against heresies, but his ideas against the Gnostic heresies, which they didn't even read their own scriptures. And that's what blows my mind about
Right.
Valentinius, Marcion.
It's really not that mind blowing. We don't read ours.
Well, we don't read ours either, but like and so this is the thing is, like, Josh has brought out like all this stuff about from the Gospel of Judas, Mary, all this stuff from the Nag Hammadi, Thomas, and it's like you read it and you're like, guys, like, you didn't even read what
Right.
you said your text was.
Right.
You didn't even pay attention to it. So for Irenaeus, like, he's paying attention, and he says your body matters because God's using it, and he does so by showing us that Jesus is fully divine and fully human, so mixed together that you can't delineate what's God and what's human. It's just all this divine, supernatural, human thing happening all at once. So that's why I would say the human fully alive is the glory of God. What a better way to say it is that when you are fully living, when you fully feel untethered and unbound by systems and patterns, then suddenly you're fully alive.
Bingo.
That's when I feel fully alive. And so when I feel this fully aliveness, and then, a few centuries later when Maximus comes along, he starts talking about this revealing this cosmic union. And the thought that somebody from that time period would use the word that this global cosmos, cosmic thing that's happening, not just to just Jesus and not just Jesus followers after him, these 12 guys that had been following him around, but to the world. So when Jesus is the one being tread and the one trotting and includes everybody in this cosmically, suddenly we're all part of what he did. We're
Right.
all part of the sacrifice. We're all part of the suffering. We're all part of the resurrection.
Yes.
We're all part of the life. And then when we are fully alive, feeling untethered and unbound by the systems that try to control or try to dictate who we are or try to make us all alike or make us something that we are not, suddenly I'm not groaning to live in the tent or the tabernacle that Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians 5, where he talks about 2 Corinthians 5, we know that the earthly tent we live in, is if it's destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent, in this flesh, we groan, longing to be clothed with our heavenly dwelling, if indeed, when we have taken it off, while not being found naked. For while we are still in this tent, we groan under our burden, because we wish not to be unclothed, but to be further more fully clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed by life. And that seems to be always the prayer sometimes, is that I live in this mortal realm. I live in this world where I have pains and suffering and my body breaks down, and I'm made physically with all of these limitations.
Right.
I was born with limitation.
Yes.
I was born with joints that eventually break down. I was born to eventually go to the grave and die. But man, that's where the change comes. That's where it happens. And it's this, I'm not saying that the whole point is just dying. But it's the analogy and the metaphor that's built within death.
Right.
That when we watch death and we see death in the world, you realize that suddenly this person can no longer please God with their actions. They can do no more to please God. And then but here they are, fully accepted by God.
Right.
Regardless of what they can do, they can't offer anything, they can't give anything, they can't do any more good in the world. But here they are, accepted by God, because they have ceased from all of their striving. They've ceased from all their labors. They've ceased from all the things that they could calculate, all the things that they could control, all the things that they could be, all the things that could try to form them into something that they are not. Suddenly it ceases. And now you're living fully. You're living fully when you are dead. So this is what Paul say, consider yourself dead.
Right.
You might not be dead, but consider yourself dead. Dead to what? Sin. Dead to all these things that try to get you to miss. All these things, all these patterns that show you, all right, that's what you're aiming for. This is the goal. And he says that I strive, I press towards the mark. I press towards the mark of the prize of the high call of God. But first he leads up by saying, I'm forgetting things that are behind. Forgetting, not thinking about it. I'm not remembering things that are behind. I press towards the mark. So it's leaving things that are in the past, leaving things that would easily beset me, but pressing on to say that there's this cosmic union that I was included in. There's something that I was recapitulated into. There's something that I was gathered into when Christ died. And he says, if I'm lifted up, I draw all into myself. I was drawn into that. And somehow I was drawn into his suffering. I was drawn into his death, and I was drawn into his resurrection for it all to ultimately become my death, my burial, my resurrection in multiple different ways, in so many different ways in my life. I can't tell you how many things that I've once believed that I thought, oh, this is going to last me forever. This is going to be a thing I'm going to hold on to forever. This is doctrine. This is whatever. This is what I'm built my life on. And suddenly it's like, all right, well, that didn't last.
Well, you feel God tread on you a little bit.
I feel like God's treading on me, or he's calling me out into this storm. And I'm like, well, I'd expect God to be out here. And suddenly I believe God in an entirely different way. Right. All of a sudden, I'm having faith in an entirely different way, because who of those 12 would have expected what they ran into on the other side of the sea?
No, none of them, especially since he said, hey, we're about to go over here. That's literally as subtle as it was. Hey, we're going to go over the other side. And then it's like, you don't pick up, like you would have thought, that would have been a great detail for you to let me know, right?
Right.
Like, hey, we're going to go on this ship, and it's going to be.
No details.
It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. I need you to be prepared. And that's how we would do it, right? Sure. If you had foreknowledge of it, like you would be like, hey, I'm just warning you. This is going to blah, 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 blah. God never really seems to operate that way at all. Like, hey.
And maybe he just remains silent on it. Maybe everybody's like, hey, man, I don't know that this is a good idea. You see that? You see that on the horizon? This is probably not going to be a good idea. And maybe Jesus just looks at it and was like,
guys, I just popped an Ambien. I mean, I'm out.
The boat's this way, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and start this way.
Let's do like 12 melatonin.
Now leave all of your complaints and follow me. We're going. Maybe that's it. Man.
Just and 12 melatonin and a glass of wine. I'm out.
See, like what you're saying, I think that beautifully illustrates what the wine press is I'm leaving the vine and the cluster that I was once attached to.
Yeah.
Everything that I grew up in, everything that I became, all that is me housed in this one grape.
Yeah.
That I've gotten from this vine, that I've been connected to with all these other folks that I've been connected to. Now, there's plenty of other clusters, but this is the cluster that I was raised in. This is how I came up. And now you're being entered into the wine press, and as you're continually pressed, the shell of you, the skin of you that houses all of that juice gets broken down and broken down and broken down and essentially pulverized into next to nothing. And all that's good that was in it is poured out. So when those that have finished their race, like Paul is talking about, when they've run their race, they've accomplished God's will, they've fulfilled their purpose. Death is just the next step.
Yeah.
It's nothing to be made trial of. It's God has squeezed out of me all of the good that I have to give. And I know at this point in my life, I don't have another drop to give the Lord.
You've died a dozen times before you get there.
Right, because the whole time I've been in the press, it feels like death.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is.
Golly.
It is. The whole time it's the death of this in your life. It's the death of this in your life. We call it like an end of an era. This was an era where I was doing this, and then that came to an end because this came along, and then I was doing this for another era or another phase or another decade or 5 years of your life. What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? What's the pattern you're following with your life? And with Christ, it's like, I don't know what the pattern is. Yeah. All I know is that every time I try to think that a pattern exists, he kills it and crushes it out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's through a whisper most of the time. It's a whisper that he speaks to me, that I know I need to have this. I need to have this worked out. I need to be obedient. I need to stop panicking and realize where I am, because where I am is exactly where I need to be.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of the storm.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the middle of the wine press. The pressure is on.
Yeah.
But if I'll just have faith
Yeah.
that it is intended for my good, that God is interested
Mm-hmm.
in what I have to offer. He's interested in me getting it right.
Mhm.
And all of these things that I'm experiencing that are a death to me, that are suffering to me, in that suffering, in that death, I am made more perfect because what comes out of me is what God intended to come out of me all along.
Mhm. And he's making you into something that you could not have been.
You can't do it yourself.
Yeah, you
The
could.
grape can't crush itself.
Right.
The grape can't make itself juice.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean that's
It
what
requires a husbandman.
I mean that's what makes everything though. I mean, what are we without our story?
Right.
What are we without our testimony?
Right.
We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Yeah.
Well, what's a testimony if everything's just easy?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a testimony.
Correct.
I mean, God's not. Well, I mean, what would that mean? Well, I accepted Jesus, and everything's been just boring since then.
Yeah, so
You know.
everything's been peachy. too.
Yeah,
Never
never.
had any problems.
I mean, my car never runs out of gas. I never put air in my tires. I never have to go. Nothing. It's just nothing. That's what it is. Nothing.
Nothing.
It's nothing. It's why God made man in the first place.
It's why atheism fails.
Right.
Because there's one thing that I can tell you that I know for certain.
Yeah.
Sitting where I'm sitting, having lived 40 years and read all of the things that I've read and studied all the things that I've studied and experienced all that I've experienced, is that there's absolutely nothing that comes from nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And if the idea is we came from nothing, and out of nothing became us, and when we die, we return to nothing, well, that sounds a lot like God to me.
Yeah.
You can call it nothing if you want to. If that's
Mhm.
your name for God, you can call it that.
Mhm.
But if nothing created you, and when you die, you return back to nothing,
Yeah.
that's the same thing that I'm
It's the
saying. I just
same.
call him a different name.
Yeah.
It doesn't
That's-
work. It's circular, pattern-based reasoning.
Yeah.
It's all it is.
Right.
And I know I'm being funny, and I don't mean,
No,
No,
it's
but
true.
it's
if you are a practicing atheist, I still want to have a conversation about things, but I want to start with that question.
nothing.
Explain yourself out of that circle.
That's because it asks the wrong question of the wrong thing. It's like asking the Bible to how to program my iPhone. It's like it's not a science book. It
Right.
never was a science book. But as soon as we start thinking out of our left brain and we start trying to make the Bible make that type of sense, like all right, you're trying to make it something that it is not.
Yeah.
This was
Right.
something that it's analogy, it's story, it's allegory, it's narrative for ways of living.
Right.
Not telling you all of this other stuff like, well, scientifically you can do this, like, or as soon as you start doing
well,
that, you're like,
they're looking
prove
at
it.
you like you do the math, and it's like, wait, first
Wait, what?
you do the math.
Yeah,
How does something come from nothing and then return to nothing?
Yeah.
Explain that one,
yeah,
science guy.
yeah.
Like if we're going to get all scientific, I have scientific explanations. There is a day
Yeah.
that is missing in our calendar based on the sun and moon's movement and rotation around our planet. Now, I know a story that explains that.
Yeah.
Where's your story that explains nothing created something?
Yeah.
Right.
Did you make that up? Oh, your echo chamber did?
Mhm.
Well, where'd they get it from?
Mhm.
Where's that written anywhere by any person that ever took the time to inscribe something on a wall or write on papyrus or type something out?
Yeah.
Where's that exist except for modern times? If you
Right.
look at all ancient peoples and all ancient civilizations, nobody was writing on the walls that we came from nothing.
Yeah.
Nobody. That's a new idea. It's a bad one,
It's a bad one.
in my opinion, because if you're wrong, that's tough. But I think we have more in common than you would believe.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I have
Oh,
more
yeah.
in common with an atheist than most. We believe the same thing, that I came from God and that I will return to God in the end. Now, you call God nothing, and that's okay. You
Yeah.
can do that. I'm fine with that. There's plenty of civilizations that I've studied and read that have called God something else.
All kinds.
And I've still seen God in all of it.
Yeah.
And I see God in even the way you think. Believe it or not. We can have a conversation about that. For anyone who's watching that's interested in that. I don't know where that came from. It just came up
Hey.
in my spirit.
It's
I'm in the
flowing.
flow,
In the
baby.
flow.
Just being like water.
So,
you know?
so speaking of the flow, there's two different thoughts I want to think about here. Number one,
Get
I
flowing.
think with Jesus on the boat before he goes to sleep, he's probably thinking forward to the moment that Peter has denied him 3 times, and he's died, right? Because what's going to better prepare Peter for that moment than a moment like that moment on that ship when, all right, I'm asleep. I'm in the lower part of the ship. I'm not a part of the equation in Peter's brain. What's he going to do? Well, I know what he's going to do. He's going to come and wake me up. But there's going to be a time when Peter, I'm going to literally be gone. What's Peter going to do? Peter's the one that says what? I'm going fishing.
Yeah.
Because I remember what it was like that night when that storm came up, and I thought it was over because Jesus was not technically awake.
Yeah.
He was not with us per se. So he goes back to the waters where he had that experience. So I see that from Jesus thinking forward. I think of Peter reminiscing on that, but I really wanted to read John 7, especially with where we went with Bruce Lee and everything. Jesus tells the disciples,
That's a great
then said Jesus unto them, Yet a little while I am with you, and then I go unto him that sent me. You shall seek me and shall not find me, and where I am, you cannot come. Then the Jews said among themselves, Where will he go that we won't be able to find him? Will he go into the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? They're trying to find the pattern here, right? Yeah. What manner of saying is this that he has said, Ye shall seek me and not find me, and where am I, ye cannot come? In the last day, the great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. And he that believeth on me, as the Scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. And there's your Bruce Lee. There's your within your own vessel, the water that breaches the banks of your patterns, the water that breaches the banks of your processes and all of your calculations that tell you, I'm going down for real. Yep. It's over. God's not interested. God's letting me die. This is going bad. This is good. Out of your belly will flow rivers of living water. And it's that living water that wakes us up. Yeah. It's the living water that wakes us up out of our slumber, out of our moments, out of our ruts that we get in, out of the seasons that we get in, out of the cycles that we get in, where we're just not vibing, as the New Age crowd would say it. We're not vibing, right? Yeah. I'm not vibing with God right now. Well, what wakes you up? When you see who you are again, when you see the reflection in the mirror, when by the waters of reflection, my soul remembers who I am. Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful that Jesus is preparing Peter on that boat for Peter after he's denied him 3 times, and Jesus is literally dead. Yeah. Like dead. Yeah. And Peter it's the exact same situation. He thinks to himself, well, what am I going to do? Yeah. I guess I'll go back to what? I guess I'll go, because if you always look at it like he's just going back fishing.
Yeah, you can say that he's going back
to a pattern, or
I go back to the water.
Crazy stuff happens in the water.
Yeah. It's like Moana.
Yeah.
Like, standing next to the water. She always comes back to the water.
Right.
Always.
Right.
And this water does something crazy and miraculous nearly every time she's been there. And it's always been something that's called her out.
Yep.
And then it's the ocean song too. Sing the ocean song.
Call me out upon the water.
And I think we're coming to, and I just want to. I think we're coming to a natural conclusion to tonight's discussion, unless either of you two have.
Oh no. Did he?
Well, with that, guys, we have some things that we have to attend to here at the service with one of our church members. Thank you for tuning in. We're sorry for the abrupt interruption to the stream, but we hope that you've enjoyed us tonight and all that we've had to bring forward. We ask that you remember one of our church members, Jack, in your prayers. We're going to attend to him and attend to that situation, and we just ask you to remember that in all of your prayers tonight moving forward. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again on Sunday. Thank you.